You know, President Obama signed 6 orders, one more than Mr. Trump in his first week. President George W. Bush is the only one in the last 20 years to sign 0 executive orders in his first week in office. Now, 9 presidential memoranda have also been signed by Obama and Trump, while Bush signed only 2. So it is a changing executive branch. What's the effect of that if that continues?
Well, first of all, we need to put this in context because sometimes things get done in executive orders and other times they get done in memorandums. For example, President Trump issued an executive order reinstating the so-called Mexico City policy that says no U.S. taxpayer funds shall be used to pay for abortions abroad. That's because President Obama had issued an executive order tearing down the Mexico City policy when he came in. President Bush put the Mexico City policy back in when he came in 2001 by a memorandum because President Clinton had taken the Mexico City policy away by a memorandum. So, you know, sometimes you get the same thing by a different way. We think of executive orders here, you know, memorandums here, directives and down here, but both President Obama and President Trump both like issuing executive orders, even when they may not need to actually issue an executive order in order to get things done that they want to get done.
Many Republicans last week argued President Trump is simply undoing what President Obama did or had done. Do you see it that way?
Well, no, I don't. In all fairness, I don't think President Trump sees it that way either. Let's take one example of an executive order. There are 2 points I want to make about this executive order. One is, this is the Border Security and Immigration Enforcement. This is the so-called wall executive order. Obviously, he's not undoing something by saying, I want to build a wall on the southern border. On the other hand, I'm not certain an executive order was necessary for this. He says to the Secretary of Homeland Security, go develop a plan for the wall. And if you got any spare money over there, start to build the wall. I want you to develop a plan to expedite asylum hearings. And if there's any spare money over there, try and hire some of what I hope to be 10,000 additional employees to expedite that. I want you to develop a plan to step up enforcement on the border. And if there's any spare money in your budget, I want you to try and start us on the path of hiring 5,000 additional Border Patrol agents. Well, all of these things could be done simply by picking up the phone and saying to the Secretary of Homeland Security, give me a plan to build a wall, give me a plan to step up, speed up asylum hearings, and I want you to think about going to Congress and asking for money to get additional agents. And if you got any money,
all that
try
might
and get it
be
done.
fine, but you would not get the same headlines, and you would probably, as the chief executive, would not be able to say that I campaigned on this, and I'm following through on my word with what I campaigned on for the past 18 months.
I agree with you about the first. You wouldn't get the headline, President signs executive order, but you could still say, look, bring the Secretary of Homeland Security into the Oval Office if you want a press event, and say we've just had a meeting and I've asked him to do the following things and we're moving forward on it. But there's something about those magic words, executive order, that seems to imply boldness and decisiveness and requires the press to pay more attention to it. But look, everything a president does is an executive action. An executive order may put it in writing, but when the president calls up the Secretary of Defense and says, I want a plan to defeat ISIS and I want it in 60 days, that's got as much authority and power as the president putting that same thing in writing. And the same with all of the things there's only one item in this executive order that I read that might have required an executive order to be issued, and that was directing the government to assess what programs, what monies could be withheld from cities and states that were sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. That strikes me, and I talked with one legal expert who said that might have been one element in there that actually needed the force of a presidential executive order. But the rest of it could have been done by a phone call and a statement.